So thank you so much for coming out on a Thursday, rainy Thursday night. I appreciate it. It's always sort of amazing when people come out to listen to other people read anything. I think it's an amazing act, and it is itself an act of generosity, so thank you. And thank you to the students who were earlier today asking me really wonderful pointed and wonderful questions. I appreciate your attentiveness to the work and to your own educational process via the work. So I appreciate it, thank you. So I thought today I would read from Troubled Tongues and then from this newest manuscript, which is titled, I think now it's being titled Detroit as Barn. And so I'll read that poem and maybe it'll make a little more sense, that title. So the first half will be kind of older poems, the second half, newer poems. And some folks asked me earlier today to read some pieces from Troubled Tongues, which I will try and do. I decided against reading Happiness, but I will read Beauty. Who asked for that? Okay, is that okay? Okay. And I'll start with one of the opening poems from Troubled Tongues called Rituals. Old this ritual, hand cradling foot. Here in vogue nails, hunched and humble, they wash, scrub, polish our feet. When beauty walks in, we all look up and ogle, entranced. She is exquisite, a mix of men, dark and light, maybe Persian or some domestic blend. It doesn't matter to the young girl in the middle chair who this morning tried her very best. Her whitest bustier, her dear pink scalloped skirt, and for a moment she was lovely. But here now, her face is full on torrent, astonishment, bewilderment, and then anger settle into a sour glower. Always swift is this moment of death and birth. The young girl oblivious to the world, the young woman beginning to grasp its edges. I am saddened that this regular girl now knows she is regular, understands something of what will never be. I want to go over and say something, but it is a private moment, and there is nothing here but loss. The husky quiet of the forest trees. The moment the world rustles unevenly, and you know nothing of it, and you understand nothing, but that you cannot change it. Earlier today we were talking about musicality, and I was saying that when I first started writing, I would hear the music of a line without actually having the language for the line, which made revising really difficult because the poem was less a poem than a piece of music, but I didn't actually understand it then. So somebody asked me, well, can you give us so I said, my editor in this book, she insisted on some changes, and it messed up the sound of the thing. And somebody says, well, of course, what? And of course, I couldn't find an example. And so an example is the line, the young woman beginning to grasp its edges, is not the music that I wanted. I think the young girl oblivious to the world, the young woman beginning to grasp its edges, and I don't remember now what the music was, but every time I read that line, I think, that's not right, that's wrong. It's grammatically correct, I think, but it's just wrong. So I will read this. So in the book, there are these chunks, these kind of prose poems, which are really to be told in another person's voice. So this is being told to you by an inhabitant of this apartment building. And it's titled Beauty Aloud. Beauty moved into the building 6 months ago, Suddenly, all our shabbiness grew shabbier. The mailbox doors wouldn't shut. Someone duct taped the hall carpet after little Quan tripped and knocked his grown tooth out. Trash overflowed, and then Demetria held another one of her protests by withholding rent, even though her rent was already 3 months late. Beauty was loud, walked as if an elephant had taken up residence in her small, beautiful bones, and she was rude. Didn't ever introduce herself properly, plus, quiet as is kept, Beauty was obvious and not that beautiful. She wore tight pants and weird wigs, some long and black and sleek as all of sleekdom, others blonde and red and purple plum. We girls clucked she was an actress or a whore, maybe both. Before Mrs. Gilbert chided, "Churn, that show ain't no working girl. She ain't never known no work and ain't no work never known her." And right about then, Mr. Jenkins started hemming and hawing about late rent, sucking his gap teeth, stuck out his stomach more than it already was. But as far as we could see, Beauty didn't care what anyone said. Stood her ground, nodding. Yeah, she thought people ought to pay their rent, pay their way. No, she didn't mean to take advantage, but well, you know, things weren't going so well for her just then, and didn't he understand? We regular folks gnawed on gossip. Beauty is a broke down bitch and is getting put out. And God don't like ugly, and you get what you give. But the men, the poor devils, they nearly lost their minds. Took up arms, scurrying around the building like ants under attack, to this corner and that corner, throwing rent parties no women would go to, trying to dissuade Mr. Jenkins when they ought to have been talking to Mrs. Jenkins. The men, those wayward believers, stealing Beauty away as if all colonies require a queen from whom nothing is expected or earned. But without our help, there was no way. So Beauty got evicted, kicked to the curb. Now the men go about their business in woe, though the world has quieted its incessant accusations. And life, baby doll's life is surely sweeter without Beauty stomping above my head. So the first half of this book, I was really obsessed with. I was obsessed with beauty, the notion of it, and what it means. So this was another manifestation of beauty that I saw, and it's a poem dedicated to my friend. My friend Terrence Hayes is a poet. His wife Yona Harvey is a poet, and they have these two beautiful children. And I was at a wake for Yona's sister who died violently and suddenly. So, and this was a scene that I saw, wake. And how she, the daughter, the niece, among the other nieces and cousins, was 1 minute squealing, buoyant, and in the next, too much of us, her body laden with the full sadness of the day, and how her father, mid-sentence, whipped his head around and whisked across the room towards her, and how, in the exact moment his arm scooped through the air, her body bowed to it, and how they made for themselves on the hill over there a perch, balm the two, father and daughter, and how lucent the stark, brimming sky, and how the world slowed, though the children played, and there was laughter even on this day. And there were chicken and beans and cobbler, cake, and how the old women wiped the kitchen, and how people sprawled heavy, and how the mother, from deep in the room, suddenly made her way outside as if someone had whispered what no one could have whispered, and how the sweet boy, Batman in hand, too, made his way from a different quadrant, and how they sat, the daughter, the father, mother and son, words between them, yes, but from here, silent, on the grass, the sun so bright on their backs, as if to make four bodies appear as one undulating tumulus, pulsing black along the horizon. And how the sister, the aunt, for whom this day seemed to be gently moving everything about, clearing the clouds, shifting bodies, divulging what she knew of beauty and how. Your father's face. It's slow, the forgetting of a face. This is how it goes. The edges blur, flesh and blood pull away from their skull, and one day, gone. You'll think yourself an awful daughter. Surely a father's face should remain sharp as first light. So like all of us who are without, you'll rummage through the boxes of your mind, searching and finding nothing but books, each holding another truth, a bigger, more succulent lesson. But you won't want lessons. So you'll continue to unpack until nothing makes sense, until the stories of your life whirl and clamor and whirl and whirl, and all the while your heart, like all hearts, will moan and lament its circumstance. But the heart is a beautiful monster. It near always survives its fate. Believe me when I say, it is not a picture you seek. Someday, when you have given in to the images of your father, your girl body relaxes finally into womanhood, someone will ask a question for which you should have no answer, and you will answer. And the soft tissue of your body for that second will look leaner, more male, and gloriously beyond you. That was a request. This next one is a request as well. I guess I'll say two things. One, every year I forget that I have allergies. And then I suffer from sickness, and I go around saying, I'm sick, I don't know what it is, there's some malady. Literally, every year I do this, every single year. I do it in the fall and I do it in the spring. And I just don't, I like to think of myself as a bright person, but clearly. And so this year the same thing has happened. I was really sick until somebody said, oh, do you have allergies? And I thought, I do. What an idiot. Just. So my throat is a little scratchy. So that has nothing to do with the poetry. That's just me talking. What does have to do with the poetry is, this poem is called Parable of Ancestors. And I'm going to just read the note. The note is, from 1712 to 1790, upwards of 20,000 freed and enslaved Africans were buried in a 5 to 6 acre site in New York City. The burial ground was discovered in the mid-1990s. So there are thousands of black folks under Manhattan, not in the subways. Yeah. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. So this is called Parable of Ancestors. There was no poetry in the men who erected these buildings atop the 20,000 Africans nestled beneath this ground, here in the middle of our great city. There was no one to say, stop you, respect, let them rest. Instead, the buildings grew up. The city groaned and stretched itself wide and wide. The millions of stories packed one on top of the other, ghosts, bumping and pulling around the city's great halls, whispering around the neighborhoods until someone heard and said, wait, our brother's bones are under here. Shouldn't we dig them up? If our world is to work and make good and true, make do, leave them where they are, but write it in the books the children will learn and be tested on. Holding up this great American city, this great America, the bones of our brothers. This is our closet, children. Bones and buildings and blood. No bigger truth than this. In the dark crevices, over top and underneath, are the dark bones, the dark bloods everywhere. This is the last poem that I'll read from this book, and it's one that several people asked me to read because they clearly want to know how to become a black woman. So this is a manual, the procedure, the process. Write it down, children. I was telling them earlier today, he was a wonderful poet. He's a wonderful poet, worth you looking up. He's biracial, although I am not. I was adopted by a white woman. He is a biracial biologically. We were talking about what it means to have been raised as black people by white people. And he said to me, well, when did you become a black woman? How did you become black? It was just a stunning question. No one actually had ever asked me that. So I thought, well, I'm going to write a response. I'm going to tell them how I did it. So I'm going to tell you guys how I did it too. And it is a true story. There you go. I did not actually, I don't even think I changed the name. The only thing that you need to know is that, I'm originally from Detroit. So we call Detroit, when I was growing up, Detroit was 95% black. So we call Detroit Chocolate City. There are a couple chocolate cities in the United States of America. Detroit is one. Washington, D.C. is another one. And Atlanta has become a chocolate city. So the two chocolate cities you'll hear are D.C. and Detroit. How to become a black woman while having been raised by a white woman, for Ross Gay. 1. In 5th grade, have Miss Kevra charge you with telling redheaded Marshall that his body odor has become a problem. 2. In 6th grade, move to Madrid, and when the girls at the Catholic private school ask, Africana? Respond, no, Americana. 3. Move back to America, where you promptly get surrounded on the playground accused of being sedity. Read, being white. Talk your way out of the beatdown. Go home and practice clipping the sharp wings from your words, leaving only the rounded middle bellies. Likewise, practice shit, fuck, motherfucker, hell over and over until their vexed edges are at the ready. 4. Keep secret from your peers and mother that you ply yet a 3rd language. 5. Get through high school by boring through rumors that you come from money. 6. Work 2 part-time jobs because your mother refuses to buy you more than 2 pair of shoes per year. 7. Refuse to talk to the white therapist your mother sends you to. Strenuously complain to the black therapist she later finds for you. Say things like, I hate my mother. And if she didn't want a black child, she shouldn't have adopted a black child. Glower a lot. 8. Get to college. 9. In a black history class, have an Egyptian woman, preferably named Shireen, resolutely point to you and scowl, That sister doesn't even know why she shouldn't be wearing that flag on her chest. 10. At 19, move from chocolate city number 1, where you are not really chocolate because surely chocolate is as chocolate does, to chocolate city number 2, where you might more easily be chocolate, read without interference from your mother or her tribe. Be more chocolate by enrolling in a chocolate college concerned with strictly chocolate issues. 11. Put to the side all of the paradoxical information you've learned about white people. 12. Start calling black people black folk. And remember to include self in characterizations about black people, such as, well, you know how we do, etc. 13. Shake it loose, baby. Double tongue, double head, double tongue. 14. In chocolate city number 2, set about finding the blackest behaving people you can. Define black behavior as A, a thing, B, as limitedly as possible, and C, by using TV definitions a la Good Times and Sanford and Son when possible. I was really messed up. I was just not really with it. Okay. 15. Use the paradoxical information you've learned about white people to explain to black folk how one might point out inconsistencies between self-empowerment doctrines they espouse and dressing Gucci down, or become a translationist. 16. Black folks who accept you in spite of your white ways and say nice things about your mother like, you should not do her like you do, or she's really sweet, or she's cool, even if you don't agree. 17. Find your way to Miss Leona's house in Beltsville, Maryland, and beg of her the secret of neck bones. 18. Grow to resent Miss Kevra for making you perform Jemima style at such a young age by taking care of some pitiful, funky white boy. That's true. You don't, those of you who are teachers, don't do that. Don't make the black kid in the class be like the mother of the other people. That's no good. 19. Find via another friend that many black folks don't like white people. Learn this by asking, you don't like white people, do you? To which she'll respond, no, I don't like Caucasoids. Hide your flinch. 20. As with 11, put to the side the paradoxical information you've learned about black folk. 21. Move to New York City where racial designations are tricky. Fall in with a crowd. Learn what being Jewish means. Realize Heather from 4th grade was Jewish. Wonder how difficult life must have been for Judy Kim in such a racially resolute, Chocolate City number 1, city. Learn what Nuyorican means. Realize that Nuyorican men, what with their beautiful African and European bones, are going to be a problem. And wonder if this is significant in some way, or at least ironic. Begin to wonder about Cuba. Take a trip to China, where poverty looks like the same bastard you saw in Morocco years before. 22. Realize that race and class are as bound as Detroit and her cars. 23. Make up to your mother. 24. Shake it loose, baby. Double tongue, double head. 25. Go to a poetry reading where you hear Sanchez calling everyone brother and sister, and believe her. 26. Get tired of the double head, double tongue, and while in grad school, lay plum pulp and honey to your hands, calloused from the weight of your heads and tongues. Get a job, move west. 27. Watch your mother die. 28. Stop for a moment. Stop. 29. Begin anew. 30. Realize it is in the nature of most animals to gorge themselves until they are satiated. 31. When a friend who adopts a child of difference asks how your mother raised such a balanced black woman, Look out into the great wing of the sky and say, love, and say, patience. 32, wonder what happened to Marshall and if he needs plums and honey. 33, and as is the way with so many tribes over these many, many years, as is the way of so many women, like your mother, lay your hands open, give over your particular body to the world, leave your wounds to writhe, dip your toes in the past to check its temperature, but not before you ask for forgiveness, and not before you raise your head and say, Amen. So now I'm going to read some poems from this new collection titled Detroit is Barn. I think it's titled Detroit is Barn. It had been titled Walking the Cemetery. I don't know. It was a finalist for the National Poetry Series last year. It's a finalist for another prize this year. I would like it to stop being a finalist and actually win something so I can get a publisher. I would like to see it actually as a book. That would be great. Instead of like manuscript. Anyway, so these are poems from that new collection. This is titled The Embrace. I have never been, and likely will never go, to the spot on the earth where my mother's ashes are buried. People do not understand. Their eyes harden. But I take comfort in the facts. The grass there lengthens. Rusted leaves fall and rot. Industry's soldiers march across the letters of her name. And today, when the small girl in the bookshop in her white tulle princess dress twirls and twirls, her throat warbling with glee, jumps into the laughing eyes of her mother, their arms and bodies clasped, their heat radiant and necessary as if they had never been torn apart. My mother's papery arm is again entwined with mine as we plod from the hospital ward's shower stall down a dim hall, thin cotton gown tight across her behind, when she, in one of her last miracles, as if a lithe Fred Astaire and against all evidence, kicks both feet in the air and squeals, I am clean, ooh-wee, I'm clean. Thus her eyes and bliss. Thus her arms and bliss. There she is, my mother, in that embrace, there. Detroit as Brewster Projects. So the Brewster Projects are a famous housing project in Detroit, Michigan that they're very close to downtown, and they're famous because Diana Ross lived there. I think Smokey Robinson came out of there. I mean, just a ton of very famous Detroiters lived in the Brewsters. And it's really a compound. There are a multitude of buildings which are all now completely abandoned. So when you walk by, it's as if you're walking by, I don't know how many acres. It must be at least 100 acres of just completely shuttered buildings. So it seemed to me very much a metaphor for the city. Detroit as Brewster Projects. It must be like this in Iraq, after a bombing, the killing. So many tall, windowless buildings, mattresses propped against openings, silence making the thing more barbarous. Danger and death bloom, balance in the wind as if pregnant heads of weeds. Always the same amputee rolling down the street, swathed in dark, fuming garments. Something brutal about his eyes. His arms powerful and veering across the line set on the street towards your car, causing you to shift, swerve. Some other vacant body standing on the sidewalk, staring into the oblong sky. Another's back turns a corner. Something is happening out of sight. Some life beneath this life. In these discarded buildings, some drug perching its swart self against the brink of light. You can feel life brimming, its blistering hand twisting, its shadowy heart making a home in the small daily changes of the place. A mattress 2 feet to the right, the tattered cloth hanging from a third-floor window, when yesterday it was 4 floors up. People perch here. Their bodies a line across which you dare not cross. You do not heed the stop sign waving its angry head. You speed up when possible, drive around the entire thing. The compound, its recreation center, the 15 buildings, the almost townhouses, parks, the tennis turned basketball courts, seated playgrounds, trees, not dead, but not as they are meant to be, bits of fire and char lining the edges of everything. People, addicts wandering their slow way around, weaving in and out of the torn and near-gone chicken fencing, as if their bodies and minds are fighting partners. Legs and backs shuffle and slide, their red eyes like mortar, like shells. The city means to tear it down, this and what it means. But today, some man, the fool, has brought a clutch of children to this desert. They are swinging on the rotted wooden plank of the teeter-totter, their mangy Rottweiler unsteady and tied to a tree. He watches as the children, bundled against the cold, learn to balance, learn to shriek. This next poem is titled People Close to You, and it is, why are y'all writing stuff down? You have a class, you have to write a report. They're just writing, they're writing. I mean, they're like furiously writing. It's amazing. It's happening. Anyway, the poem is, the first half of the poem is just a prose poem, but the second half of the poem is called a contrapuntal. And so the contrapuntal is a form kind of like this. It's 3 poems, really. So what you'll hear is the first portion, which is just a prose poem, and then you'll hear me read the second section. You'll hear me read the third section, and then you'll hear me read the fourth section, which is the lines are, this is one line. So, okay? So I just want to show you what it is that you're hearing. People close to you. 1. She asks if she can sit on the bench, and it is that kind of day in Santa Monica, slow and gentle, so that when she sits properly, like a teacher or the pudgy mother of a girl named Marilyn, in unison you raise your round faces. The wind hefts the voices of your deadlings. They are serious and sorrowful women, full of warnings. But today, they seem content to let you be, saying only, child, be thankful. Open your chest, that great cavern, to our other sister. And so you watch the sea. Who knows what the woman beside you hears? There are so many languages in the world, and your tongue is tied to this one. So you sip iced tea and lean a bit forward into them, your gone women, your sages who seem to be stroking your head. You begin to imagine the ocean floor as a cup, the pouty lips of God, the soft foam, the salt, as if food, tasting sweet and clear. 2. When she turns to you, you think she might say something about the sea's beauty, about the sun's slow emergence, how salt tastes on the tongue. Instead, she says, I am hungry, tenderly, as if this is her name, the fact of it blooming in front of you, and she smiles. Sister, I would give you food, but I cannot, you, holding up your empty hands, though you have just eaten. You have a wallet full of food. And she smiles again, and she begins to rise as if an apparition, moves back into her crevice, her body no more than a crevice, an intersection for two opposing points. She nods and lingers a moment before turning her face to the sorrowful voices of your deadlings who moan, oh. 3. When she emerges from a corner at the drive-thru on a Detroit night, her eyes hollow, body stiff and dirty, she might screech, her need so black, so dark and dangerous, explain how she emerges in tatters from a darker crevice, no more than a crevice, vile, angry. Sis, can you help? Get back, you say, fear seeding itself. She smirks, you think. It's hard to tell. The dark takes even that of her triumphs. And again you say, don't, and you mean emerge from the dark. Your hand grabs the box of chicken. No, you say, Jesus. And she smiles again and begins to retreat, as if an apparition, moves back into her crevice, her body no more than a crevice, an intersection for two opposing points. She nods and lingers a moment before turning her face to the sorrowful voices of your deadlings who moan, oh, oh. 4. When she turns to you, when she emerges from a corner at the drive-thru on a Detroit night, her eyes hollow, body stiff and dirty, you think she might screech, her need so black, say something so dark and dangerous about the sea's beauty, about the sun's slow emergence. Explain how she too emerges in tatters from a darker crevice, no more than a crevice, how salt tastes on the tongue, vile, angry. Instead, she says, I am hungry. Sis, can you help? Tenderly, as if this is her name. Get back, you say, fear seeding itself, the fact of it blooming in front of you, and she smiles. She smirks, you think. It's hard to tell. The dark takes even that of her triumphs. Sister, I'd give you food, and again, you don't. But I cannot, holding up your empty hands, and you mean cannot emerge from the dark. Though you have just eaten, your hand grabs a box of chicken. You have a wallet full of food. No, you say, Jesus. And she smiles again. And she begins to rise, retreat, as if an apparition moves back into her crevice, her body no more than a crevice, an intersection for two opposing points. She nods and lingers a moment before turning her face to the sorrowful voices of your deadlings who moan, oh, oh, oh. I'll read 3 more poems, a little lighter. So I don't actually think this needs much explanation, except for in the South, and Detroit is kind of like the South, we just call it Little Alabama. So you often just are, you call people by an attribute, you know, so you might be hat, you know, and I don't know, you might be red, you know, right? I might be teeny, right? So this guy was wearing, you guys know what Bermuda shorts are, right? So they're those awful kind of 3/4 length kind of deals that people wear. Sorry if anybody has any of them on, but he was wearing some of those, so this is that. It's just called mindfulness. Bermuda shorts is at the bus stop in a shock yellow shirt, yellow cap, matching yellow and black sneakers, is looking not unlike a person dressed as a bumblebee, and is thirsty. Across the street is a Starbucks, leaving him with options, bus or thirst. But this is Detroit, city of bad attitude, drive slow as you want, a bus driver, so the bus will be late. So Bermuda runs through traffic, which isn't traffic as it once was, but as it is, which is pitiful and sparse and slow, so no hard hassle, and buzzes into and up to the counter where he puts on a show. Breathes so hard that Apostle Brown looks up and frowns at Bermuda's jive-acting bumblebee butt. Bermuda gasps for water and is told, we don't give water, to which he replies, I can't get a glass of water? The bugs of his eyes bulging. Can't do it, annoyed barista says, mouth tight as a knot. Bermuda. If you hadn't planned to get thrown out, it would have been best not to puff. Why not? And when manager barista, head bald and shiny as a mirror, eyes moving across the spine of her memories where they rested on an unexpected indentation, a small and persistent curve of kindness, said in her vermouth way, well, we typically sell water, but, sighing and shaking her head, hold on, before moving to the faucet, it would have been best not to get brand new and yell, hurry up! You'd have done better to quietly watch the small back of her turn and be thankful for the moment of her familiarity and be thankful for the moment of her thankfulness. It is good to remember when someone is giving a thing they need not give, a glass of water, a smile, what love they can muster. We are wise to feel stroked by the warm genius of a world that does not motor on just reciprocity and sense, but on something altogether more mysterious and splendid. Two more poems. Enlightenment. This is also a true story. I love Detroit. If you ever have a chance, go. And there are two Starbucks in Detroit, you know. One is on a college campus and the other one is on the corner of Woodward and Warren. Mack and Warren. Mack and Woodward, that's where you go. But there's only one, so you just ask anybody, where's the Starbucks? They'll tell you. Really. Enlightenment. She is merging onto the Edsel Ford freeway in a car no longer made, in a city that no longer makes it, talking on her cellular phone, fingernails purple and red and caging the wheel, head cocked and foot heavy. In pursuit of a race car, she's bought a roll of black duct tape, has rolled 3 racing stripes down the sedan's hood, as if she's been whispering with Buddha. And he said, sister, relinquish your resistance, your discomfort, forsake your ego, which is what she has done. Which is what it means to want but not have in a city stacked with desire. To know desire is our most ruinous trait. is the moment in the morning when you decide to be unsatisfied and unhappy. Our want is just one of many in a line of wants, and the line of wants is ancillary to the line of needs. People close to you are hungry, and you have ignored it. People close to you have lost their jobs. Today, somebody's mother has died. Today, somebody's child has been murdered. Today, somebody has lost sight, and your lumina runs. Your lumina runs well. Luminosity, woman. No one's coming to save you. There's nothing from which to be saved. I'll end with the title poem of the collection, Detroit as Barn. Gone the hay, gone the tools, gone the morning work. Over there a tractor rests. Gone the cows, goats, the slack-tongued mule. Left are owls and rats, fat, wily cats, and the field where wild weeds grow. The farmer, they whisper, driving past, knows everything a body needs to know about dying. You can tell by how he doesn't bother to paint or prop up the barn's worn wood. Still, folks click their teeth and wonder on which day at what time the pitiful barn will give. The farmer, too, scratches his mighty balding head. But he's forgotten the good wood he used, the hard nails, the family, friends, and their strong backs. That long ago barn rising, that cider and fine punch. Thanks. Do you want me to take questions or no? Does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
With the one poem that you demonstrated the kind of rhythmic devices of, what's your personal favorite rhythm scheme to use in poetry?
Oh, I don't have one. Yeah, I don't have one. I don't have a, no, I understand that to be a kind of formalist question, and I don't really have a particular form that I like more than others. Yeah. Yeah.
So how did this happen?
This?
Yeah.
The two things happened. I was in Santa Monica, and this woman turned to me and said, "I'm hungry," just out of the blue, just said just like that. And I felt like the response that I gave was ungenerous and narrow, and it bothered me. And then I was in Detroit, and a woman came out of the corner where you couldn't see that she was even there, at the drive-through, and wanted something to eat. And again, my response was equally ungenerous and narrow, and I didn't like it. And so I was trying to, I thought about what would be the best way, or what was it that happened? And what did I want to say? And the contrapuntal, so the word contrapuntal comes from counterpoint, which is a musical term, where it's the juxtaposition of two opposing things. And this seemed to me to be two opposing things. And the two opposing things seemed shifty. The two women were opposing, but I was opposing both of them in individual time. So the form lent itself for me to the content perfectly. And so that's how that happened.
Is that why it used a lot of repetition, because you're kind of naming two events where similar things happened in both events?
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yes?
A lot of your poems sound very, thank you, they're very, very, they have a very distinct voice when you read them.
Mm-hmm.
They're very, very distinct. And I was wondering if you write them knowing how they're going to be read, if you read them out loud
Well, I was telling them earlier today, when I first started writing, I would hear a line of music and then a fixed language to the line, and then I would chant the poem out. I would literally just close my eyes and kind of chant the poem out. I'd be typing with my eyes closed and like singing almost. I don't do that anymore, but I am very, for example, difficult for me because it's really hard for me to hear what other people hear in terms of where the line is. I just can't. So that said, I don't have any idea how someone else is reading my work. I have no clue. I can only use language to guide and line breaks and space and punctuation. But other than that, I kind of just give it away. Like I put it on the page and then it's off into the world to do with what people will do with it. And I don't know. And that's fine. That's what art is, right? Anybody else? Yeah. Mindfulness. Thank you.
When did you feel drawn to poetry? Was it a young age?
My uncle, who's amazing, he's a high school education, and he has more poems memorized in his head than anybody I know. He loves poetry, makes sense of life through poetry. So if something is happening in my life and I'm upset, I'll say, Uncle so-and-so, and he'll say, sweetheart, Omar Khayyam has a poem, and and he has a line in that poem, and that poem, he means this, it's amazing. So when I was little, he would recite poems to me. And my dad was a jazz musician, so I remember very acutely, like Dr. Seuss, and I remember being obsessed with sound. And it wasn't until, I never wrote really until I was in high school, and my English teacher, this is such a cliched kind of story, because all kinds of people have the same exact story. And it's the power of teaching, right? My English teacher made us write a poem. And she somehow thought the poem I wrote had some sort of promise. And she made me read it out loud. And I thought, well, hell, I can do that. Like, that's great. And I was already a pensive kind of kid. I'm pretty pensive, and I think metaphorically. So I started writing these kind of little quippy, kind of metaphoric little deals. And I just had tons of these. And I would just write them and write them and write them. I wasn't thinking to be a poet. I didn't really understand that one could be a poet, really, until I was maybe in my late 20s. Any questions? People are questioned out. Thank you guys so much for being so attentive and generous. I appreciate it.